Hi Chris, how are you?
Good afternoon, Rod. Yeah, I'm really well. It's an interesting one today. I've had to draw the blind as we are recording on Saturday the 15th of March. It's in the afternoon, so we've had sun. Normally we're first thing in the morning and sun's not a problem.
We've moved the time around a little bit, haven't we? You know, we started off, we were on a Monday evening, it was quite late, we had to get it done, but I think we've settled into a better rhythm of doing it in the weekend.
Yeah, the weekend seems to work around our families, but it is the Formula 1 this weekend, inaugural race of the year, and it's on tomorrow, replayed at 8 in the morning, so it's my fault that we're moving it today.
This is fine. I've got MotoGP racing this weekend, the second race of the season, because as always, bikes is ahead. And
I think we're starting a little late this year. I don't know why. Sometimes we start a bit earlier than this.
Yeah, the superbikes generally starts faster in the motorcycling world, but you know it is what it is. Should we just crack on and do some follow up?
Let's just say it's episode 164 because we normally get that in, and let's dive straight into follow up.
So first story, and it's literally follow up from what we did last week when I was saying that some French universities had offered American scientists to come over following all the cuts in America, and it's literally just a small story. Just my pronunciation, I'll mangle this. Marseille University has rolled out a welcome mat for American scientists. So if they're out of a job in the United States, well done the French. Vive la France for giving those undoubtedly extremely good scientists work. So
there's going to be some talented people there, surely. It's great, France doing it, and I'm glad you pronounced it because I don't know how I would pronounce AIX. My brain kind of just has a moment, I think. So good pronunciation.
My small amount of time in France skiing and motorcycling has left me with a even worse mangling of the French language than it did when I did O-level French, and I am that old. I did O-level French in school, which I failed, I must say. I fought to stay in the class, but I failed, and the French just laugh at me, but I have a go.
Do you know what? I've not been to France in about 15 years, and I'd love to go back. I haven't been for so long. I really want to go back. I'd love to take the children.
It's a terrific country.
It's beautiful.
And I won't hear a word said against the French. I love how militant they are about things that matter to them. They go out and they demonstrate. That revolutionary culture really runs through them, and I respect them for it. I think it's a terrific nation. I think they're great people.
100%. I want to go back to Paris. I loved Paris, and I'd love to go back and do it again.
Vive la France.
Vive la France. That's a show title.
Show title. Not a show title. It's Further Cuts in America. And just as we were on a bit of a kick about research and things like this, and we've talked about the cuts, the University of Massachusetts, and there's lots of universities in Massachusetts, that's where Harvard and Yale and MIT are as well. So I think this is more of a city college type deal. University of Massachusetts has actually cut their entire intake of biomed students because of funding issues. And I just think this is horrendous.
Yeah. The cuts are quite a thing, aren't they? They seem to be cutting everything in America at the moment, and I don't think we saw this coming.
This wasn't on the bingo card, was it? I mean, no. I don't know if you were in the news, following the news, but Cardiff University cut its nursing program.
We spoke about it on here, didn't
we? Yeah, we did. So it's not unusual that universities cut programs in light of funding challenges, but it's not normally countrywide, and it's not normally self-inflicted in the way that this has been. But I feel bad for these biomedical students. You know, you get your degree, you're awarded a place on your course, you're ready to start, and at that point they cut the rug out from under you. I think it's disgraceful.
Agreed. And especially here in the UK, we need our nurses. We are, our hospitals are overrun, aren't they? So it's a real shame that it is being cut.
Yep, a real shame. So I hope these kids, young adults, get alternative courses. I mean, it says in the article that they will be offered a place should the course be allowed to be offered again. But I just think, you've sorted it out. You've been high school as would be in America, and this is what happens. It's just it's poor.
Agreed. Very poor. We're going to dive into Apple now.
We're going to dive into Apple now, and I think we're going to come and go on a couple of stories here, to be honest. So I'm just going to do this, and we're going to talk about a comment from Jonathan Ruiz, who said, and the main show is going to be a lot about this, it's kind of wild if you think about it. The only thing out of Apple that's been a clear win for its fans recently is Apple Silicon. The Mac is the best place ever in terms of hardware, but everything else, software developer relations, Apple intelligence, App Store policies, Apple leadership, isn't going too well. He's not really that wrong, is he?
No, I'd kind of concur with that statement. Apple Silicon has been absolutely amazing, and is a clear win for everybody, whether you're on the Mac or not. But it's not great in other places, is it? I think we've really struggled, haven't we, with a lot of decisions they've made, direction, quality, relationships. So I think he summed up pretty well.
Yeah, I can't argue them. And I think this is the developer of Bridges, which is an app we recommended on this podcast for bookmarking things. So it's not like he's
gathering links.
Yeah, it's not exactly like he's a non-Apple, developer. He knows the ecosystem fairly well. So when people like this, your developers who, we've talked about the failure of the Vision Pro, the relative failure of the Vision Pro. It's people like this you want to keep on side, not to be talking.
And I did see a comment in the news this week. I think somebody was calling that the best thing Apple could do is probably have an in-person WWDC and try and put their arm around their developer community and that. But they've really struggled. I do wonder though whether Apple's also struggling where they haven't had a change of leadership recently. Do they need to freshen it up a little bit? Is it time for a change? And that's not normally something I would call for, but I do wonder if they're getting a little stale in places.
I think that's maybe very reasonable. We wouldn't be the only people to be talking about that. I know other podcasts have been launching against Tim Cook's particular extended reign at Apple. And let's face it, it's the biggest company in the world. It's not like he's done a bad job, but
he's done a good job in some metrics, but not in every metric.
There's a whole cultural issue going on there I think needs addressing fairly dramatically, particularly in light of what's happening in America at the moment, but it is what it is. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Microsoft Outlook and some of the outages?
Again, I still struggle when I read this because I thought that it was the app and I was like, I haven't seen this in the app, but no, it's MicrosoftOutlook.com. So if you're an Outlook.com user and you're using your Outlook.com email address in Apple Mail, not in Microsoft Outlook on your device, we still have this problem where you can't always log in and authenticate correctly. And it's been going on since the 3rd of March, which is unreal that, it just seems to keep happening. It's a couple of weeks in and it feels like Microsoft don't know what the problem is. And it's very strange because you'd have thought they'd be, have a hotline into Apple and Microsoft and Apple would be talking at a very, technical level of getting this resolved quite quickly, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Very strange. And they've got some mitigation steps to do it, but they're monitoring it. But what does that mean? Like, what is the problem here? And there doesn't seem to be an update coming out for iOS that will solve it. So it seems very bizarre. I'm surprised they're not pushing them onto the Outlook app. Why aren't they pushing onto their own app and get them off Mail maybe? I don't know.
This is sort of very classic and old school internal technical support, isn't it? There's a problem, we're trying to fix it. We've got no news for you now. So they say nothing. And that the balance between an IT department that does this kind of thing and then my best example of this is a rail company in the UK that now every 33 seconds tells you there's a delay of even a minute. You're sorry we're being delayed. The reason is because of X. If this goes on more than 15 minutes, you're going to get a refund. And they keep telling you and they keep telling you. And that's actually fine. At least you're giving me some sort of information as opposed to a vacuum. This is a vacuum that these users are struggling with at the moment. And I think that's not good enough.
I think you and I might go on the same trains.
Well, we're both roughly in the same part of the country when we go to London, but and it doesn't help our trains are always late as well.
Yeah, generally late, but let's move. I don't get into trains up with the whole show derailed.
Yeah, we could talk about that for a while. Tell us about Apple Music Classical because that's your favourite app.
Yeah, Apple Music Classical. I do like Apple Music Classical. I'm not a big classical listener and I'm definitely no expert, but I do like the service. I have been listening to some music just this week, and whilst on the train, it's quite a good link actually. So Apple Music Classical is now available on the web. So if you have got a Mac, and you can now listen to Apple Music Classical because you can go to the website and listen to it, or if you've got a Windows PC or a Linux PC. It just seems very odd, Apple's whole rollout. It took them years to, after the acquisition to get the app out on iOS. And I don't think they've done a great job because for me, they've tried to get it to share your Apple Music database. So sometimes you see you recently played in Apple Music and in Apple Music Classical, whereas I'd prefer more of a wall between the two, if that makes sense. So it's taken them a long time. And then we've got the web app, like 4 years after the acquisition. It's very bizarre, their whole rollout strategy. I'm glad they've done it because I'm using my Mac a lot more now, as we've discussed, so I can listen to it here. I quite like that sort of music when I'm working or I'm reading and I just want something on in the background, but I don't want something with lyrics in it that I might sing along to, and that's why I use Apple Music Classical.
I think it's good reasons to be supporting it, and I'm not surprised Apple aren't the greatest at getting a web app out the door. They haven't historically been very good at that kind of thing.
Their web apps, though, are very good, but they are so slow at getting out the door. But you'd have thought they had most of this with Apple Music. And I know Apple Music Classical does some different things for how it presents the albums and things, but it's just frustrating how long it's taken.
Yeah, they're not great at this. I will say, having been on the Linux side of the fence occasionally, There's some really well done embedded apps. There's a thing called Cider, that if you're an Apple Music subscriber and you want to get that experience of iTunes effectively on Linux, Cider encapsulates the website of Apple and actually makes use of it in the same way that an app does. And stuff like that's really clever. And it always surprises me that Apple don't have internal tools that will let you do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. You can, yeah. I have tried writing a third-party app against Apple Music. It's quite cool. There's quite a lot there, but they haven't updated the framework in years, and that always worries me with those things. Are Apple going to stop updating it? And, a bit like Twitter did. Are they going to actually? They've encouraged third-party apps a few years ago, done nothing for a few years. Are they going to stop it?
Yeah, and just for podcast listeners, this will be in the show notes. We'll put the link to Cider, but this Cider application you can use in Mac OS, Linux, or Windows. So it's a cross-platform thing, and I think it's really cool that these kinds of creative applications are enabling for people. That if you are on a platform that is unsupported by Apple, i.e. not very well on Windows, frankly not very well on Mac either, things like Cider can come along and improve that experience.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's fair. There's some really good third-party apps out there for Apple Music.
I agree. It's all you now, Chris, because this is Formula One, and I'll get to shush about it. Tell us about this.
So the Apple Sports app, and this did make me go and install the Apple Sports app back on my iPhone because I actually have very few apps on my phone. So I did go and install it. So Apple have released F1 support for the Apple Sports app. The Apple Sports app, let's say it's basic at best. Do you know what I mean? It feels like something you'd have made as a prototype for your, for your university project maybe. So first off, I opened the Apple Sports app and I was like, right, where's the F1? I have no idea. And you have to delve into, I think it was edit next to your name and go and tick F1. And then when you get the F1 bit, this is all you get. You get to, tells you when qualifying is and when the race is. And it now tells you who qualified in pole. I mean, literally, they phoned it in. It's like they've just got an apprentice working on this. It's really bizarre. F1 is massive. It's got a lot of media attention and more and grown, and yet they've done literally nothing. It made me install the app and try it. I doubt I'll be keeping it. Again, there are better third-party apps out there that I would recommend people look at.
It felt to me like the Apple Sports app was because Eddie Q wanted to get his basketball results really, really quickly. He's an executive in Apple. He's a big basketball fan. He's quite often. Is it the Lakers? Is the Lakers basketball or whatever the San Francisco baseball team is, Angels maybe. He wanted to get those scores really quickly, and that seemed to be the impetus for it. And all that really mattered was it didn't need to look great, but it had to have speed. My experience of the Apple Sports app was I downloaded it. I'm vaguely interested in the Boston Red Sox as a baseball team, so I put that in, and even the limited interest I've got in baseball, I didn't find it particularly useful. And the fact that it's, as you said, phoned it in for Formula One, when they're about to release a film about Formula One and are obviously kind of all in on it, you think they'd want to go a bit harder.
Yeah, I kind of expected the app to be a lot more like the Stocks app. So in the Stocks app, which I use because I work for and have shares in various PLC companies here in the UK, and you can tap on that company and it will show you news around that company. Obviously, it comes from the Apple News service, and I thought the Sports app would be a bit more like that. Yeah, you can see the latest, what the championship scores are, what the next event is, and here's all the news because they've got all the news in the News app. And I just find it odd that they haven't done that. I've still got to go over to the News app if I want to. I've stopped using it. But I just find it really odd what they've done there. They've got Apple Sports. It could be a hub. And I expected Apple to make it a hub like Apple News for sports. And they haven't done it, and I don't use it. So the app will get deleted off my phone once we've finished this podcast.
And fair enough. And let's face it, the sports I'm interested in aren't really reflected in here at all. Until very recently, Formula One would be the only thing you were interested in. They've done such a shocking job that you're going to delete it immediately. Today is the end of the Six Nations. Wales are playing Scotland in about 2 hours' time, 3 hours' time.
Ooh, interesting in your house.
It's very interesting in this part of the world, for sure. And it's great. You drive around town, you see men in kilts, you see, even if they haven't gone up to Murrayfield for the game, the Scots here are interested. I should really put my Scotland top on. But you can't get rugby league on this app, rugby union on this app. You can't get MotoGP on this app. If you're a golf fan, you can't get golf. Not that I'm a golf fan, but if you are, fair enough, legitimate interest. Where's that? Why is it so limited?
I don't get it. They've done the bare minimum of sports, and then for the sports they have done, they've done the bare minimum for those sports. It's a very bizarre app. Like I say, it's going to be coming straight off.
they've done American sport. So they've done baseball, football, and now there's a vague interest in soccer. That we're getting Major League Soccer in there as well. And now, fair enough, Apple have got an interest in that because they obviously put that as part of Apple TV Plus for an extra amount of money. But there is more in the world than just America,
There is, but it's all just it's just so basic. I think that is the problem with it. Either do the sports properly or don't bother. And they've done, if they'd have done American football really, really well and then slowly rolled it out, I would get it. But all they've done is a few select sports really poorly. I just find it, it's very strange.
I think it's worth a reflection at some point on why all the most recent Apple first-party apps have been absolutely rubbish. If we think about the Clips app, if we think about the classical music app, if we think about the sports app, the Invites app, Journal, rubbish.
And not on every platform, all very bizarrely done, I think. So there you go.
Let's move on before we get cross. We're going to get cross later in the show anyway. And in news that was completely unsurprising to me, we talked about this about 6 weeks ago, I think, at this point. Sonos is going to have a streaming video player. You thought it was going to be great. I thought it wasn't going to go anywhere, and they've cancelled it before it got out the door.
I don't think I said it would be great. I think I thought I thought it made a lot of sense for them to do it in line with them starting to own the whole experience inside your living room. They don't make the TVs and they don't make any content media streaming boxes, but they own all the speakers. So once you've got the speakers set up, you've got a great name for it, you probably want to start eating up a bit more of what people are going to buy. So why wouldn't you make a box to start streaming, and it plays nicely with all your sound bars and your speakers, and then obviously the next place they need to go is they need to buy a panel off somebody and make a TV and take the smarts out of the streaming box and just put it straight in the TV. You buy a Sonos TV and it hooks up to your speakers. You could see that as a strategy they would take. I just find it odd that they've abandoned it, because to me it made a lot of sense for them to own more. Because where do they go after speakers? Do they just carry on doing speakers? That's fine, but why wouldn't they go and do the TV and do the panels?
I think TV panels are such a commodity item. I mean, even Apple doesn't make its own panels. They just buy them off LG or Samsung.
That's what I meant. Why wouldn't they buy it in and just put a Sonos bezel around it, but have it play nice in their ecosystem? And rather than just buying a speaker package, you're buying your whole TV. You're buying the whole experience from them.
I think the problem is you've got a diminishingly small audience. That Sonos have torched their brand slightly with the app, and even die-hard fans. And let's face it, I was a returning fan to Sonos, given that I'd gone in the Apple speaker ecosystem for a little while. And the app was garbage, and I couldn't get it to play on some of the speakers and all the rest of it. And they've more or less fixed that now. They've chucked out the CEO and the CTO, I think, because they got rid of two major people at the company. And if you were an incoming CEO, in the same way Steve Jobs came back to Apple and went, cut that, get rid of the Newton, we're not doing the Mac clones, we're not doing all that kind of stuff anymore. You'd look at your audience and you go, okay, only our most hardcore fans would buy a Sonos streaming box, or take that to its logical conclusion, a Sonos TV. How much more would we charge from it than an Apple, from an LG, from a Bang & Olufsen? If you think of a high-end TV manufacturer, I don't even know if they make TVs still to this day, but once upon a time they did. What's the really market differentiating factor in something you're known for audio, for doing video? And I can't see the conclusion. They'd be better making a proper 5.1 surround system. At the moment you can only have a center speaker and the rear speakers and a subwoofer. So I think,
Or do they do 7.1 or whatever? I don't know what all the numbers are, but you know what I mean. Go to the next place.
Yeah. I mean, they've got headphones. Headphones is logical to me. You're staying in that audio ecosystem. I never got the streaming thing. Most people use their TV in the default apps that come with their TV. Very few people buy a breakout box like a Roku or an Apple TV.
True.
So I can't see it making any economic sense to anybody to get into this market. Amazon, yes. Apple, maybe. Google, yes. But there's nobody else is gonna win in this market when they're just built into the TV these days. And most people don't care. They just want a cheap, good-looking panel at whatever size they want.
Yeah. I think you're right. It pains me, but I think you're quite right.
I can't be right all the time. One thing we're awaiting for, neither of us right about, but sort of awaiting it, we've talked about it repeatedly on this podcast, is that Apple will be fined soon for its violations of the DMA. So we followed this in quite some detail leading up to this potential announcement. It's not actually been announced yet. When this article came out, which was on March the 10th, I was thinking we'd get it sooner. I thought we were going to get it this week, but I think it must be next week at this point. So the EU will fine Apple for DMA violations, it would seem.
A modest fine, which is interesting because obviously modest is a different number to different people. Like you and I getting a modest fine's like £50, say, whereas Apple getting a modest fine, what's that, 100 million?
A billion? I don't know.
I don't know either.
It could be a lot, though. I mean, we could see this coming, though, couldn't we? We saw all the various issues they were having with developers and notarizing apps and pushing back on things that had been authorized already. And unsurprisingly, there's going to be a fine coming because it was very much not in the spirit that the DMA was intended.
Agreed. And that's not a shock, is it?
It's really not. Should we do some news?
Yeah, let's dive into the news.
So since the iPhone 16e was launched, we've all been awaiting issues with it, and it's gone all right, I think. I haven't heard too many people complaining much about the iPhone 16e.
No, on the whole, seems to be a non-event, which is what your basic new phone should be because it is their lowest level phone. I still think this phone's ideal. This is a great corporate phone, and if it was cheaper, it'd be the phone I'd be recommending my family would buy that aren't into their tech. But sadly, it's just too expensive, isn't it? But apparently, there's Bluetooth audio issues with it, so you could be listening to music on it, and it just pauses and then starts again. So that's got to be infuriating.
I have an occasional Bluetooth issue with my iPhone, with my van's Bluetooth. I don't know if now the van is so old and Bluetooth is so new that it starts breaking up. I shouldn't do that on a podcast, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have to pause it and play it again. And that's a relatively new iPhone and quite an old Bluetooth system. But in this case, people are trying newer phones with it, or older phones with it actually, and their Bluetooth speakers are performing fine. So it's obviously something in the hardware, and I presume that the C1 chip is involved with that.
C1's just cellular, though. It's not Wi-Fi or Bluetooth.
Okay, so it's not, but maybe it's an engineering thing that they haven't accounted for, because it shouldn't be the software. The software is the same as every other iPhone.
Or as we're going to talk in a minute about antennas, could it be something to do with the Bluetooth antenna and the way the case is designed? I don't think I know enough to comment, but it does seem odd.
Are we going to have another antenna gate? Wow.
Yeah, we haven't had one of those for a while. I'm hoping this is going to get fixed in a firmware update. That would be the ideal, wouldn't it?
That would be the ideal. Not all things, if it is antennas, it's a hardware problem. It can't be fixed in a hardware update. They'll have to ship another bumper case.
True, but it would be surprising for Apple to have this. They've had a really good track record for the, squillions of phones they've sold, delivered to end users. They've got generally a pretty good success rate of the hardware.
Yeah, after that one, iPhone 4, was it? It was the iPhone 4. And for those that don't remember, antenna gate was if you held the phone in a particular way and you bridged the two pieces of metal in the case, the sort of separated part of the case, with your fleshy meat thumb, it would block the signal and that your bars would drop, which, let's face it, in most radio situations, if you include the antennas, you're going to have an attenuation of the signal. So if this is this again, and the way Apple got around this was they grudgingly gave you a bumper case if you wanted it. You could pick one. Steve Jobs went out there; he wasn't impressed, and it also came with the classic phrase "you're holding it wrong," which often comes out when Apple make mistakes and won't own up to them. So this will be interesting to see how widespread this problem is.
Yeah, it will be interesting, but it's not going to be a widespread phone, so I would imagine this problem won't be that widespread, and therefore I reckon it will go away quite quickly.
Watch this space. Something else that might go away quite quickly or not is reportedly weak Wi-Fi on the M4 Mac Mini. Yeah,
so we've both got Mac Minis, but I must confess I pretty much use mine just on Ethernet, so it's hardwired in. And this can be, though, if you've got, they think because the Wi-Fi antenna's in the plastic at the bottom, which makes me ask why is it not in the plastic Apple logo on the top? So it's in the plastic at the bottom, and so if you've then got your Mac Mini stacked on top of something that's metal, it could interfere with it, which I can understand. Mine's just here on the wooden desk, and it's fine, but it does make sense that there can be some interference, or it could be USB cables. So it just seems a little temperamental there. It depends on what's around it.
Yeah, and the first comment in this article is "you're holding it wrong," which has amused me no end. That was completely unplanned for. These things just come together occasionally. Yeah, I mean, it's not great that you plug a couple of cables in and things, the Wi-Fi signal starts to weaken. I'm the same as you. This is a desktop computer. I want it plugged into as fast and medium as I can. Apple's ability to shunt files back around within the operating system isn't as good as Windows and Linux. That people like Jeff Geerling have proven this, that the connection when copying files can be variable. So I want to give it every chance it can do. I've got a 10 gig Ethernet port on the back of this Mac Mini. I've plugged 2.5 gig Ethernet into it. Let it rip. If we had Wi-Fi 7 kicking around in this thing, which isn't an option on the Mac Mini, that might be different. So I think it's not a big problem. I can't believe many people just park them and it's just on Wi-Fi, but maybe I'm wrong. It's a small computer you can mount to the back of a screen.
I think a lot of people will have them on Wi-Fi because, a lot of people don't have Ethernet, do they?
Yeah, I suppose that is possible. But wouldn't you be on a laptop? Who buys the desktop?
Yeah, that's
computer,
true. Desktop's such a small margin of what Apple are actually selling. It's amazing they even make so many desktops, considering how few people buy them.
Let's not give them ideas. They might stop making them.
Fair point. Do you know what? I've generally, what am I now? 2 months into this Mac Mini. I love it. It's brilliant.
I think we gave it a product of the year this year, I think, didn't we, the Mac Mini? And it remains so. We're gonna, we've talked about the new devices that came along last week, and I still think the Mac Mini is the strongest device in their lineup at the moment.
It's perfect for me, and I port it sometimes between my shed and my house, and it is just ideal for that. And I've got a keyboard and mouse in each location. I just plug it in and off I go. It's a fantastic piece of kit. I love it.
It's great. Something else that I think is great is Apple have committed to encrypted end-to-end RCS messaging. So for those that don't remember, RCS messaging is what Google mostly uses, rich communication service. There was a big deal in the current version of iOS and iPadOS that Apple were actually going to support RCS with Android phones. So you'd get rich indicators like people were typing. If you were part of a group with an Android person in it, the green bubble friend would at least be able to see sensible reactions to things and all the rest of it. Well, they're bringing encryption to this as well, and I think that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, it's funny how this has come out like 2 weeks after the UK wanted a backdoor into encryption, and Apple are like, right, let's do encryption on the non-Apple messaging protocol. So it's good to see it in there. It's the right thing, isn't it?
I think this is an exact reaction to that. I think it's Apple actually doubling down, not a phrase I like very much, but doubling down on encryption. That if you're going to chat to your friends, employers, whoever, trusted sources for journalists, get encryption in there so the government and various criminal organisations can't read it.
Yeah, agreed.
So great, but let's have more UK carriers supporting RCS, please. I think there's only really EE and Vodafone.
Yeah, I'm on EE, so I don't know.
Yeah, and you don't have a lot of Android friends. Have you seen the RCS communications thing happening yet?
Yeah, a few people I text. Because you see it in the message, it says text instead of SMS next to it.
Very good. I haven't, and my carrier doesn't support it. So when I flip back to Android occasionally, I just get bog standard SMS.
Oh, that's a bit rubbish.
It's a bit rubbish, yeah. Do you want to talk about some medical stuff? Because I know you love a bit of that.
I don't want to talk about it. And I wasn't that keen on reading this article ahead of the piece, but I'll let you give us the overview on it, because for listeners, I'm incredibly squeamish.
We know you're squeamish. So 2 stories, one of which I've put in because it's unusual in the healthcare space, and this one is just amazing. The intersection of technology and healthcare is always of interest to me, and I think everybody who's human has a healthcare problem at some point or another, and a lot of healthcare problems are related to cardiac issues. That our hearts are very important. You want them to be fairly reliable. Over the course of in the 1960s, we had the first heart transplant. Which the chap who had the heart transplant didn't live very long afterwards, but the fact we have them at all is amazing. But this story, where a man with an artificial heart has survived outside of hospital for more than 100 days and is still alive, is really quite incredible. If we're not talking about transplanting from other humans, or we're not transplanting from animals, if we can actually build the technology to replace organs that, hopefully at some point don't rust, clot, firmware expire on, all that kind of stuff that might come along with the technology. This is really cool. Oh yeah,
don't get me wrong, for as squeamish as I am, this is amazing that this has even A, happened, and B, is working. It's insane in my view.
I'm really impressed with this, and it's called a Bivacor artificial heart. Imagine the sort of permissions and testing and clinical trials and everything where you get to the point you can actually put this in somebody.
Yeah, I don't even know how you'd go about doing that. It's got to be quite it's a very long project, isn't it, to go from in conception all the way through the stages to where we are today, and all the sign off to get it done. It's amazing.
And now I'm just lost playing with the 3D model.
It's quite cool though, the expanded or exploded view of it and all the parts. And if you looked at that without knowing that's meant to be an artificial heart, you'd think it's like a piece off a car or something.
It does look like an inlet manifold or something off a car, doesn't it?
100%.
It's very cool. More stuff like this. If we don't have to I need to be very careful what I say. I think there is a place for animal testing, obviously with the right ethics and morals and everything that goes along with that. And it shouldn't be done willy-nilly, and it shouldn't be entered into lightly. But stuff like this, where we can actually rely on technology to take the place for this, is absolutely, particularly in the American healthcare market, where you do have to be very careful with suppliers, firmware, all the issues related to Human Tissue Act, all this kind of stuff. If you can build a heart, that's quite impressive. And if it can keep going for more than 100 days without failing, that's even more impressive.
Yeah, completely agree.
Something else that might be good, depending on how much you drink, is a new and large study has shown that drinking alcohol can be good for your cholesterol levels. Yay, alcohol good for something.
Whoop, whoop. I did text this to my brother because I knew he was having a few drinks with some friends last night. So I texted him that today. That's some good news. But surely, though, it's like with everything in moderation has got to be the answer, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think some things you probably shouldn't engage in at all. But it's not to say drinking is good for you. But the fact that there is one positive outcome from alcohol is interesting. Obviously, that's, as you've said, moderation is better when it comes to alcohol. I suspect the problems related to liver disease, various cancers and all sorts of things that come along with drinking too much is still there. But drinking your cholesterol, lowering your cholesterol levels, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, agreed. And it's nice to know that when I have a beer later, I'm doing it for the great good of my body.
You're doing it for science. You're doing it to lower your cholesterol, not for any other reasons of drinking.
Exactly that.
I think that's probably fair enough. Should we talk about some legislative stuff instead, just because that's always fun?
Do you think you should ever have been in the legal profession?
I don't think I have the patience to be in the legal profession.
You seem to know more about it than most, though. I think that's what I've learned.
But it's funny. Somebody asked me, "Do you have a podcast?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "What do you talk about?" I said, "We used to talk about technology. These days, we just talk about the law and how it impacts upon things and how government and politics impacts upon things."
It's amazing, though, isn't it? Because for such a long period of time, being into tech, you were just into tech, whereas now it's a lot more legal in it and politics than it's ever been.
Absolutely. So this particular case is there's now a UK investigation into Apple and Google and whether they're holding back browsers. And this is the Competitions and Mergers Authority, Markets Authority. Markets Authority looking into this again. So the CMA pop up fairly regularly in our stories, I've got to say. It's nice to see the UK actually taking interest and responsibility. We're not just leaving it all to the EU and the United States. And, I think they've kind of got a point, of course. On Android, you're going to expect Google Chrome. On iOS, you're going to expect Safari. That's a pretty locked down experience, certainly when it comes to iOS. But saying that, I think the browser space is pretty locked down.
Well, it is 100%, especially if you're outside the EU, because you don't use alternative browser engines. You're locked into WebKit. So I don't know what they're investigating here, but you can tell them the answer from a quick scour of the web. If you're outside the EU, it's 100% locked down on your Apple device, which is in, 80% of the people in the UK. I've made that number up. But, the majority of users in the UK, they are on a lockdown browser, whether they pick Chrome, Firefox or Safari or another, because it's got to be the Safari underpinnings, which is wrong. And they've demonstrated they can allow it in other parts of the world, i.e. the EU, that they can have any browser engine. And that's why I was a bit annoyed with Apple last year. They didn't take the initiative and roll some of the EU specific stuff out to the wider user base.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's the same old response. Apple replied to The Verge saying, "We have concerns with this report and believe that remedies it discusses would undermine privacy, security and overall user experience. We've had browsers on desktop computers for as long as I can remember at this point. And yes, there's privacy and security issues with them, but then you educate your users not to just bang their credit cards into site X." So I'm not that believing of this kind of response to this.
No, it's rubbish, isn't it? And it doesn't explain, though, why I have to use your browser engine. Surely you can have a scheme like you've done in the rest of Europe that allows alternative browser manufacturers to use their engine. That's what's annoying on this one.
I think
we've seen
Apple,
they can do it.
We have. And Apple know if there was an option to install proper Google Chrome on an iPhone, people would install proper Google Chrome on the iPhone because the people like using Chrome.
Not this person, but I agree with you. I'm in the minority, and the majority of users, I think, would go to Chrome.
Well, I've had to flip back to Safari this week for the podcast. If anybody watching us on YouTube, always follow us on YouTube, by the way, because my operating system wasn't letting Firefox, Zen browser, share the window randomly since the update. So something weird is going on. Is it Apple locking down? They only really want me to use Safari to do the podcast? I don't know.
I'm going to say it's probably just some ad hoc bug that's happened.
Yeah, there's plenty of them. They're not bug-free Apple operating systems, people. Just so you're aware. I'm sure you're very aware. Should we move on and talk about what Amazon is doing with the Echo Dot?
Yeah, so I was reading this earlier. So Amazon with the Echo Dot, they're removing the feature, which basically allows you right now. You can tick a box to say, "Don't send my voice recordings to the cloud," i.e., keep everything local. That's going away. Part of me can see why they're getting rid of it. It's going to be at the end of March. They're doing away with it probably to unify what they're doing, because they're going to offer you one service, and they want all your recordings to go to the cloud because they've got this new AI Alexa service launching, and they're going to want it as all part of that. So you can kind of see what they're streamlining from their point of view, but equally, I kind of would like everything processed locally, I think, potentially, if I could, because we did have the scandal quite recently. I think it was with Apple predominantly, and I think Amazon were involved in it too, where people were listening to recordings and they weren't encrypted, and it just makes you wonder what they are sending back home.
I think there's a lot more echoes in people's houses than there are Apple Siri-enabled devices.
100%. I mean, I know I'm in the minority with my HomePods. I love my HomePods. I don't know if I've mentioned that, but I've still got the version Gen 1 ones, and they're still live and kicking in my kitchen. And as long as you just ask them to play music or set a timer, they do a pretty good job. Everything else I wouldn't use it for.
Yeah, they're fairly rubbish. Mine are sitting in the drawer behind me over there. This bothers me, though. I think most users don't expect that there'll be all the recordings will be sent back, a certain amount of processing, and then that should be thrown away. On one hand, though, I do get it. They want to build an ever more personalized profile. They want to feed it into their large language model. They want to improve their responsiveness to their customers. This is in a world where not only are you going to have to pay for the Echo device, but you're going to have to pay a monthly subscription if you're not an Amazon Prime customer, in which case you already pay a monthly or annual subscription to have this data. But what I don't know about this is, do you have the ability to delete it if you ever leave the product?
Yeah, that's what I did wonder, because in fairness to Apple, there is an option somewhere to go delete all my recordings, which is the right option to have, surely. So I don't know.
Yeah. As she states, you'll still be able to have an Amazon delete voice recordings after they've been sent to the cloud if you have do not send voice record option turned on. But it will default to don't save recordings on the 20th of March. So defaults are problematic. Most users don't look at them.
Yeah, I think that is the problem, isn't it? Most people, just don't even look.
Hands up, I don't think people should have Alexa products in their home.
It's never been for me, but they do good. A lot of people do like them, and they kind of do what they say on the tin.
They do. Do you think you'd like it if they updated your Eero routers to include Alexa?
Generally, my routers wouldn't be in a great place for that. I'd just turn it off, I think. But if they were Alexa devices, I probably would stop buying them at that point.
That's interesting, isn't it? That's the line that they cross with you if that was the case.
Yeah.
On one hand, you could understand why they'd want to integrate everything into one device, though. Oh, you're an Eero customer, you're an Amazon customer. Let's just make life easier for you and incorporate your Wi-Fi hotspot, your Alexa, all into one place. Because I suspect you're unusual. Most people who have them will have one maybe in the kitchen to boost their Wi-Fi or something like that. So
yeah, I purposely tried to hide my tech, if you know what I mean. That's why I quite like my HomePods. They're on the sides, but because they're white, you can't really see them. My Eeros, one is in the cupboard under the stairs, and one's in the loft, and it's purposely done like that because I don't want to see my tech. I like it hidden out the way. I don't want the cables everywhere. And I've also Ethernet them in, whereas a lot of people would just do the Wi-Fi mesh piece, whereas I purposely run the cables.
Fair enough. Should we do a car corner?
Yeah, I put something in car corner.
Well, it's over to you then.
So I put this in for two reasons. One, it looks cool, but firstly, and more annoyingly, is in my BMW app. BMW sent me, a message saying they're releasing a whole new iDrive system. And I was like, well, why is that in my app for my car? I'm not going to be able to get this. And it really annoyed me that they're advertising their new OS to me that's not even in a car at the moment, in my app that's to link with my current car. I just thought that was a misuse of why that app exists and why that app sends me messages. It should tell me about software updates and my car's been charged and the aircon's on, or whatever it may be. So I was a bit cheesed off with BMW for that. But then you go and look at the link, and so this is BMW announcing its new iDrive X. It's the 10th version of iDrive, and I think it looks pretty cool. And what they're basically saying is, look, you're going to have a screen in the centre for entertainment. We're going to have a long, thin strip underneath the windscreen I guess it's entertainment information, but also car things like are you parked, are you driving, what's your speed, how much battery's left. And we've got the heads-up display, and they're kind of bringing it all together in one. And I think, to be fair to BMW, they've historically done quite a good job with their OS. It's generally been quite well thought of. I really like the OS in my current car. I admit I use CarPlay for all the entertainment piece, but the bits of it that I do use, I quite like the styling of it. I like what they've done. I think they've done a great job with the digital display. But I just think what they're doing here looks cool. BMW are doing a good job, I think. I don't get why the screen in the middle is a bit wonky, but I find that a bit odd. But on the whole, I think they've done a good job. It looks kind of cool. I'm curious to see what this is going to be like in a brand new car. Probably not one I will buy, but I think it looks good.
I'm slightly confused by this user interface. It looks like at one point he's swiping a cloud out of the sky and putting it into his weather app, and in the particular clip we're looking at the moment, he seems to be able to reorientate the screen in the middle based on his hand gestures, unless that's an entirely virtual display. So I find that a bit mystifying. The swiping the cloud thing is blowing me away slightly.
It feels like they've taken a bit of creative marketing license in that video. I think it's going to actually be quite dull in real life, because you're just going to have a screen and a very long, thin screen. I do like the idea of this long, thin screen underneath the window, though. I think that's actually quite smart. I think that's a great way of showing data. And it's next to the road. You're looking at the road, you can glance down. That seems to make a lot of sense to me.
I don't dislike it. Volkswagen in the ID series have a bar that ties in with the navigation, so they've got like a light strip inside for the driver and the passenger that, if you've got a right turn coming up, pulses towards the right hand side. So I think BMW have taken ideas like that and this, I agree with you, as in terms of a heads up display, although you can't see through it. I notice it's opaque at the bottom of it.
They have a heads up as well.
I can see that in the picture below. It's different. I don't know why they need a massive BMW logo in the middle. Presumably you're driving a BMW. It says it on the steering wheel as well.
You'd hope you know. I think it's one of these things. It looks like CarPlay Gen 2 that we never ever got. It looks like they've done a bit of that, like you say, a bit of the VW stuff. I'd like to see it, actually, because I do think BMW, for me, have done a good job with their version 8 is what I've got in my current car. I think it's very cool. I'd like to see what this looks like.
Yeah, the final version of it, I don't want to see the marketing speak. I don't like this when he's changing the colours of what's in front of him in his windscreen. I don't like that very much.
It feels like that's just going to be your LED lights. But I think we need to see it.
I think we need to see it. And I know current BMWs have a large screen. And this is very Hyundai, actually. Hyundai have two massive screens in front of the driver. One of which for the climate control and one of which is for the car function, speed and charge and all that kind of stuff. So, they're all influenced by one another, aren't they? But, fair play, BMW, a bit different. Yeah,
no, 100% they are influenced. And I think BMW do a good job of trying to pretend that the two screens are one. They do a good job of faking that and making it look actually pretty good. It is quite cool. And when people get in my car and they've not seen it before, like that massive strip of screens that you're seeing now, I've got that in my car. It does look cool. Yeah, it is quite an engaging experience.
Well, the exciting news for me is that Volvo in the next few weeks should give me digital key for my Volvo, so I'm very excited to have that on my phone.
Do you know what? It's the one thing I do miss when I drive my other cars is I have to actually put a key in it.
The one thing I haven't talked about this that I like about this that the Tesla had is there's no starts and stops. I get in, I push down on the gear stick and I drive away, and then I get out of the car and I walk away. I don't need to press start or stop or do any nonsense. It's and that's what I want to happen.
Yeah, that's cool. That's better.
It's an electric car. Why do I need to mess about with start and stop? It's ready to go. Just press drive and go.
Yeah, it's kind of like a hangover.
Yeah, why? It's not going to keep. Anyway, should we do some media? First up, continuing my Bond marathon, I'm now on to Thunderball, or I've finished Thunderball, from 1965. These films are cracking on a bit now when you think about it, aren't they?
1965, wow, yeah. Was Thunderball the one that they brought Sean Connery back to film? I can't remember now. Was something weird behind it? Or am I misremembering?
There is something weird behind it. I mean, I can get into it if you want. So there's one more in the Sean Connery initial run. We have You Only Live Twice next. And after that, it flips to George Lazenby to do On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Right.
And then Sean Connery came back for Diamonds Are Forever.
Okay.
And then...
then Roger Moore.
In the 80s. Then it was Roger Moore. But in the 80s... Sean Connery came back and filmed Never Say Never Again for a different company who'd bought the rights to the Thunderball book differently. So I think the Eon company made Never Say Never Again. So Sean Connery does come back and play, but he comes back once for Diamonds Are Forever and then again in the 80s. But it is basically a modern remake of Thunderball.
Modern now being 40 odd years old, but yeah, understood.
Yeah, a more modern remake of Thunderball. Anyway, quite enjoyed it. Good critic scores, good audience scores. You can see the change in Bond from, as we talked about last time with Goldfinger, where it goes from being a spy story to being he's a superhero with gadgets, and that just continues in this.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think it's quite a good film, this, if I remember correctly. I need to do what you're doing, I think, and go and rewatch them.
I think what's most impressive for me is it still looks really good, certainly in the version of it that I'm watching, but how well done the underwater scenes are, and there's quite a lot of underwater scenes in this. It's, there's lots of diving, and they steal a Vulcan bomber, and there's nuclear weapons underwater, and all the rest of it, and sharks, and a guy with an eye patch, and all the things you want to see in Bond. But having watched The Abyss again recently and this, they did a really good job for 1965 of filming all this stuff underwater. It must have been a massive thing to figure out.
Yeah, that can be hard because obviously you've got low light. It can be hard to get a good picture that ages well. So fair play.
Yep. So I've enjoyed that. An upcoming warning, or it's out now actually, there's a new Apple TV show that's had been very, very well reviewed called Dope Thief. Severance is coming to an end, finale next week. I'm on the lookout for things I can replace my Severance fix with, so I'm going to check this out. But yeah, it's had good reviews from critics, and nice to have sort of a murder mystery type thing going on. Ving Rhames, Brian Tyree Henry, some good actors in that, so I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, this came across my radar. It certainly looks quite good. I just haven't really got into a TV series lately. I don't know what's wrong with me. I haven't watched Severance, and this does look good, though. It did come across my radar, so I think I just need to find something at the right when I'm ready for it and get into it.
Fair enough. One from you.
One from me. So I put A Real Pain in. This is what Kieran Culkin won his Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. I started watching it. I just couldn't get into it. It scored amazingly, 96%. So I've watched about the first half an hour, but it's just very slow for me. And sometimes I do like a drama. I need to try again, I think, when I'm more in the mood to watch it, I think. But I want to see it because I really like Kieran Culkin in Succession. But the problem is when he speaks and some of his mannerisms, he just reminds me of his character out of Succession. And I think it's hard then for me to forget who he played in that and just think of him only in this role, if that makes sense, which is a very different character.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can sometimes not typecast, but maybe stereotype is the right word. I don't know. Your expectations of how an actor is going to respond are very much based on what you've seen them in before. So whenever I see him in Succession, I was thinking of his character in Scott Pilgrim.
Which I've not seen, so that would make sense. I know I'm a bad person. And it's also done by a director I really like.
It's one of the greatest films of all time, but let's move swiftly along from that, because otherwise my jaw will hit the floor again. I didn't realise Jesse Eisenberg directed this as well.
Yeah, I think it's his debut of being a director as well.
Pretty good debut if you immediately get a Best Actor nom out of it, award out of it.
And he looks to play, but he looks like Mark Zuckerberg there when he played him in The Social Network, so he can be also typecast sometimes as that bumbling sort of person. Love him.
Yeah, same character in Zombieland as well.
Yeah, Zombieland, of course, he was in that.
Good film. Rotten Tomatoes have also given your next thing a rating of 82% by critics and 89% by the audience. What's this?
It's this film called Official Secrets. It's about 6 years old now, so it came out in 2019. I wanted to watch this because I've seen it before, but I wanted to rewatch it because I'd forgotten a bit about it. And this is all about somebody who worked at GCHQ, which isn't that far away from where I live, and I drive past it quite frequently. So GCHQ being our secret intelligence centre here in the UK, and it's not that secret because it's like it's like a donut, but a lot smaller than Apple's donut. It's you can look at it on a map. But this is a film about the 2003 Iraq War that started, and the person that Keira Knightley plays basically leaked one document and like a memo that they got sent to staff, and then she gets taken to court over it. But I'd forgotten how good it was and how good they got the era, the cars, the feel, and I just thought it was really good. And it's got Ralph Fiennes in it, it's got Keira Knightley in it. It's good cast, great British film, true story about her, like I say, leaking this document to the Observer. They published it, but the person who checked the typography and the spelling corrected some of the American spellings in the memo, and therefore they thought it was a fake memo because we spell favourable differently, for example, without the U in it. But it's just a really good film, and I think the scores are fair. I just thought it was really good, and like I say, set in a location very close to me.
Very nice. I should probably check it out. Yeah, it sounds interesting. I think Alan Rickman's last film was in this sort of space as well, wasn't it? Eye in the Sky or something, British Intelligence Services, and
Quite possibly.
it's just as you were talking there, I noticed that the most popular film on Rotten Tomatoes here has scored 15%. I think that's the new Netflix film with the Russo brothers.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
But 15% of people just watching it because it's so bad.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing you're going to have to check out, I guess, isn't it? I don't have Netflix anymore, and for things like that, I guess I'm glad I don't.
But just one thing, though, on Official Secrets, they did have an iMac G4 in the background, so they really did get the period correct with the tech that was available, which I quite enjoyed. And Tamsin Greig, I don't know how to pronounce her name, she was in it, and she played a very different character to some of the comedy shows I've seen her in. I thought she's fantastic because she just nailed it. I thought she was really good.
She's a great actress, Tamsin Greig. I agree. A Minecraft movie.
Yeah, so finally, for some reason, my children are playing a lot more Minecraft at the moment, but there's going to be a Minecraft movie with Jack Black in it. I did not know this was a thing. It's coming out in time for the Easter holidays, which obviously makes sense here in the UK. There's usually a movie out for kids to go and watch, and I may well end up taking my kids to see this at some point because they like a bit of Minecraft. And I think your children used to play Minecraft.
Used to play Minecraft. I think I saying that, I was helping my daughter out with some referencing this week, and I could still see in the dock she has Minecraft for Mac still installed, so it's not completely gone away. I want to be rushing to see this.
It's probably something I wouldn't normally go and see myself, but I've never really got into Minecraft. But like I say, my children have been playing it this weekend, so we may well go watch that. But I didn't know this was a thing.
Well, they make a movie out of emojis, for goodness sake. It's not really that big a surprise.
Fair. But I thought it was a good segue going from media into games.
It's a very good segue. I was going to say something about it's a shame we don't get a Fortnite movie, but maybe that would also work too.
Oh, I don't. There's enough Fortnite in my house. I don't think I need it on the TV as well.
Games. So, first story, one of the drawbacks of the new Snapdragon X Elite laptops is that not all apps are compatible with them. Lots of things, like Adobe had done some to bring Photoshop over, and Microsoft obviously have the translation layer, but lots of native games won't work because of anti-cheat in the kernel. The kernel's very based on x86, so Intel or AMD code. So some games like Fortnite would not run on Snapdragon X Elite processors. Anyway, Epic, who don't like to miss out on money, are going to help this by bringing more things so you'll be able to play games such as Fortnite with easy anti-cheat to the Snapdragon kernel. So I think that's only good if you're a gamer and you've bought one of these laptops.
Yeah, it feels like we kind of need both forces here. We need enough people to buy these ARM laptops and want to, and hopefully desktops at some point and want to play games on it. And then we need obviously the software providers to come too. So it's great that Epic are doing that.
Yep, I think it's great to see these laptops. I watch hot UK deals. They're definitely dropping in price, the Snapdragon ones. There seems to be a wave of people who say, don't buy one of those, it's not compatible with your stuff. So things like this has to happen in order to make it a productive and useful processor.
Yeah, hopefully that will diminish over time, the incompatibilities.
At the same time, I don't see Microsoft really getting behind it. I'm not seeing another wave of laptops with the next generations of these chips coming along that are going, hey, you can run Windows and have 19-hour battery life, and you can still play, and here's Epic playing games, and it works with all these Microsoft games, and it works with DaVinci Resolve or whatever it is that doesn't work with them at the moment.
Yeah, it does seem quite slow going there. They haven't had that massive Apple Silicon shift that we've had.
No. Anyway, it will be interesting and worth keeping an eye on. And good news, if you've got one and you want to play Fortnite.
I don't want to play Fortnite and I haven't got one.
Good news for people that like spend money. It's that time of year again when Steam is on sale. So it's a Steam spring sale, and there's the usual sort of 15 to 50% off various hot properties if that's what you're into. It's just a PSA. I'm not going to buy anything this time. I don't think. I've got more games than I can play, frankly, as evidenced by us not talking about games very much in this game section. So you got your eye on anything?
Yeah, I do. So whilst you were talking, I was just going to pull up my wish list because there was a game I mentioned on here. There's a couple of games. Dune Spice Wars is on sale. It's got 50% off, so it's $14.75. And Settlements Rising is down to 11 quid, which, I mean, it was only 15 quid anyway. But that is a game I've been wanting to try. So I may well pick up a couple of games, but again, like you, I have not found the time to really play many games. But my kids do like it if I game while we're in the same room. They just quite like that idea of we're all gaming together, even though we're doing our own thing. It's just nice being in the same room, isn't it, and chatting and things. So I may well pick up a couple of things when I get a minute.
I have a couple of recommendations then. No Man's Sky runs really well on the Mac. Could be a good test of your M4 Mac Mini. It's a really expansive game. It launched on PlayStation to massive underwhelmment. That's not a word, but people weren't very impressed with the initial release on it. And this game, they have just continually updated it, upgraded it. It's a phenomenal looking game. The whole universe is at your sort of hands. It's a little bit of crafting and things in it, but you can plot your own way with it. It's really impressive what they've done over the years.
Should you be buying this on your PlayStation or on your Mac? Like Civilization, I wanted it on a desktop with a mouse and a keyboard. But No Man's Sky feels to me like that looks like more of a PlayStation game to me.
I think you'll have a really good time of it on your computer. I really do. And let's face it, if you got it in your Steam library, you got a gaming PC at some point, and you can see how good it looks.
It's quite a dated gaming PC. But okay, let me. I will stick this in my wish list, and I'm going to come back, I think, and spend some money on here soon.
And my other recommendation, and I can't find search on the web page here.
Top right, down. There.
No, it's right there. And I'm keeping Max in mind here, would be Disco Elysium. Which is definitely one of the top 10 games of all time. It is an amazing soundtrack from what was British Sea Power and is now just Sea Power. The developer of the game is so obsessed with the band that there's all sort of links in there. Kind of a mystery game. The conflict between fascism and capitalism very much features in it. It's a really well done, very large, impressive game. And it's only £8.74, so I'd recommend Disco Elysium as well.
Right, okay. I will stick that on the list too. Sorry. I think I clicked on the wrong one. £8.74. Yeah, found that. Okay. Right. All on my wish list done.
There you go. So there you go, listeners. A couple of things if you want to not be listening to the podcast and go and do some gaming would be my recommendations for the Steam sale.
Sale ends on the 20th of March.
If you don't pay for Steam and you're all in on the Apple ecosystem, Apple have announced some new games coming, 6 new games coming, including Roller Coaster Tycoon to Apple Arcade. Have you ever played Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic Plus. Yeah, I have a little bit. I was never really that into it. I was more of a SimCity person. But actually, I'm a little tempted to pick this up. Obviously, it's free. Might be quite good on my iPad for a bit of fun. So I may well give this a go.
Yeah, I think it's worth a look. You've got Roller Coaster Tycoon. You've got Casamari Damarsi, which is one of those games people seem to go crazy for, but I've actually never played.
I've never played it either.
No, but I know it's popular. Space Invaders Infinity Gene Evolve, whatever that is. Puffies, whatever that is. The Game of Life 2+. Is Game of Life that board game that I used to play when I was a kid? I think it probably is.
Yes, and this looks like a rubbish implementation of it on your tablet.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it? That launched an App Store link for me there. And then last but not least, Sesame Street Mecha Builders. So if you're in the market for one of those and you're an Apple Arcade subscriber, then there's some free games coming your way.
It's good they keep bringing more content, I guess.
Bit slow.
Yeah,
but they have got the 2 games that only ever really matter, which are Balatro and Slay the Spire. So what more do you need?
Of course, I play those games all the time.
Well, you should, because they're awesome. We should have scheduled this with the earlier content about Snapdragon laptops, but Epic, who love money, are also pushing the return of Fortnite to another app store. Brazil has been pushing back on Apple, as we talked about last week, that they want to allow sideloading. I think it was within 90 days, wasn't it?
Yep.
And should that happen, then Epic are going to be there ready to go to give Brazilian gamers Fortnite back on the alternative app store. Not really a surprise.
No, not surprised at all. And Epic are probably feeling pretty smug that they've done all the investment of getting the version ready. You know, they're there, aren't they? They're just waiting now for the world to open up and allow their app on all the app stores that aren't Apple app stores. So it feels like this is going to happen more, I think. So hopefully a smart move by Epic.
I mean, Apple could play a blinder here by just allowing sideloading, welcoming Epic back, giving them back the keys to their developer license and letting them get on with it. And then a lot of this regulation would go away, because Epic are by far the sort of strongest people shouting about Apple's monopoly on the App Store and the walled garden. They seem very blind to this, though.
That's probably because it requires humble pie to be consumed.
Yeah, Apple don't like eating that, do they?
Not at all.
Shall we do a main show?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first off, is based on a rumour, iOS 19 is going to be an entirely new design language, apparently. The biggest revamp since iOS 7. You and I both lived through the iOS 7 days, and I wouldn't say I was scarred by it, but it was definitely a big event when iOS 7 happened a few years ago. And the thrust behind this is a higher level of integration between the Mac, the iPad, and the iPhone. And I'm not talking about the Vision Pro. Those are the 3 things they want to integrate, and that's as far as this goes, right?
But apparently the design cues are coming from the Vision Pro. So the glass sort of OS aesthetic from the Vision Pro is going to come over to the other operating systems. Part of me I thought this was coming last year. There was talk of it last year. So it feels like it's a thing that is happening. It's interesting they've got an Apple Sports screen in there. I kind of like the idea of it because you look at your phone, it's like, crumbs, is it still iOS 17? And I still remember the big reveal video for iOS 17 when they brought it out and they showed Apple hardware, and then they suddenly went into all the screens and the design aesthetics around iOS 7 and the layers and the transparency. And it was cool at the time. And actually, I was always quite a fan of some of it. I think it got confusing in some areas where they didn't have buttons, and I think we actually quite like buttons sometimes to know where to stick our finger in and push something. But on the whole, I think they've done a good job with it. But we have had that aesthetic for a long period of time. But it's going to be interesting to see where this goes, because part of me worries, well, is it going to be slow and buggy? Because if you're going to be doing glass-looking stuff, is it just going to add an overhead? Is it going to be buggy? Because our OSs are already quite buggy, as we've discussed. I don't need lots of tentpole features, thank you. I just want everything to be really robust. And does it mean that my beloved iPad OS is just going to get a new touch of paint this year, rather than actually having some better functionality that makes it more desktop-like, more Mac-like, which is what they've been giving us in dribs and drabs every other year, and it feels like we're going to get nothing but a new coat of paint, which I could probably live without. It's also risky because there's so many more users now than when there was iOS 7, and people got really upset on iOS 7, did they not?
Yeah, these are all good points. I think people got really upset with iOS 7. I remember I was running the beta and I had to go to a 3 shop in London for a SIM card or something. And you went, oh, that looks different. It doesn't look like a normal iPhone. And they said, I absolutely hate that. And that was sort of the first and him as a mobile phone person would get lots of people coming in going, oh, what's happened to my phone? Why isn't this working? And that was, 10 years ago, longer now, that happened. So I think the public will push back. They like things the way they like them. You and I used to have a lot of joy about new interface elements coming along and what the next operating system was and what new things, exciting things it would bring. I think we're well past those days. We get iterative, updates if we're lucky, and they steamroll over all the bugs and things. And frankly, as I got older, I enjoyed the Snow Leopard sort of releases where they went back and they actually fixed the cracks that were appearing in the operating system. Whereas all this is doing, all it's doing is putting a new sheet of paper up in front of it and giving us some new icons and things like that. That's not very fundamental and will just upset people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that's my worry here is, your family installed it and like, why is everything changed and why is everything not in the same place? So I think Apple's got to be careful how they message this and how they do it. Maybe they'll allow it to be an opt-in. Would you like this new look? This is what it's going to be. And you click that button and then they forcibly over on the next version. It's going to be interesting to see how they do it. But do they really need to do this right now when they haven't delivered everything they promised us a year ago? I know we're going to talk a bit about that in a minute. So I do quite like the idea of the new look. I do think some of Vision OS looks pretty cool. And I can see this has probably been on the cards for a while, because you take Stage Manager, for example, which I know hasn't been great on the iPad or on the Mac, but Stage Manager is on the Vision Pro. So you can kind of see where they're going in unifying everything to have the same functionality, the same look and feel. They should have the same apps, but obviously Apple have done a really bad job of getting all the same apps out. Would it not be better for them to actually spend the engineering resource? Let's get Apple Music Classical everywhere, Apple Journal everywhere, whatever else, all the Vision Pro apps that are missing that they need to go and do the compatibility work on. I think there's bigger things they should be doing that isn't just about the look and the feel.
I don't understand why they all need to look the same. I really don't. Because I am not crying for iPad-like interactions with my Mac. I don't want Mac-like... No. And I'm not crying for Mac-like interactions on my iPad. Well, I kind of am, because I keep saying you should be able to install Mac OS on an iPad. But in my head, they're different things. I pick them up to do different things. I view an iPad primarily, I know you do it differently, as a consumption device, not a creation device. And I want lots of windows open. I want to be able to move things around when I'm on my Mac. If I'm doing a lot of really intensive computing, I don't pick up an iPad. Equally, if I want to look at a web page on a nice big screen or read Apple News Plus, one of the magazine subscriptions, I don't pick up my phone. I don't think these things need to look identical. I have no problem visualizing what a window is and why I need 2 of them or 3 of them or 4 of them side by side in order to have all those things going at the same time. And if the intention here is because kids have grown up with touch devices for as phones or iPads, and now can't work a Mac because they don't recognize the icons look the same, or the visual language about a drop-down menu isn't the same thing. Well, learn it. I did. You did. I think babying users to the extent that you think they're idiots and they can't work out things because you've made them like this, well, teach them properly how to use these devices. I don't think Windows is having this existential nightmare about this.
I think they're way more adaptable than they're given credit for, children, and they just pick it up. And how many Macs are sold by the day? It's an amazing amount, isn't it? And if my children were off to uni today, I'd probably go and buy them a Mac laptop, as I'm fairly confident you've done. So that's what I would go and do. Look, this is what you need to get your work done. Have one of these. Off you go, kind of thing. And I think people just get used to it.
Absolutely. And the underlying attitude that, oh no, we're all idiots now and all we can cope with is an iOS-like or iPadOS-like interface, I think is nonsense. Macs are flying off the shelves. Windows laptops are flying off the shelves. Chromebooks, for goodness sake, which are what kids are taught to use, let's face it. It's a big browser window, but you can have a couple of them side by side. You know what I mean? I think this sort of continual desire by Apple to dumb down the interface to the lowest common denominator, which is iOS, isn't right. You need to not even a power user. Your average user can cope with it. Fair enough, they might go to full screen mode and be able to swipe through them, on their laptop screens. But they have the choice if they need to have those things side by side. They know how to pull down a menu. If they're using a sophisticated word processor, there's lots of things that they're going to have to go into the menus to find, no matter what they're doing, be it an iPad. So I don't understand this desire to unify the user interface. I'm okay with it. If the icons are a different shape, I don't care.
In some ways, I thought it was better when they were different shapes and things. And it is sad that you look at people on Windows now and go, oh, your icons look way better than the Macs, whereas historically it was very much the other way around. So I think I'm kind of with you. I think there's a balance to be had. Let's use the machine for the job it's good at and have the interface that suits how you're going to interact with it, rather than just trying to harmonise it for the sake of it. However, maybe we've got it wrong, and maybe they are trying to make them look similar but let them be their own thing. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
See, the settings app doesn't give me any hope that that's actually the case.
Yeah, that's a fair point. They've not got good form, have they?
They haven't got good form. And speaking about them continually releasing terrible apps, the settings app is an absolute disaster. Looking through it to try and figure out where anything is, it's inconsistent. You still got apps got their own preferences, panes and panels. It's not all in one place. I'm not sure if the controls are active. If I click this, is it going to work? The text still runs off the screen everywhere. They need to fix that. They should have left system preferences as was, because I knew where things were. And it's not just old man shouts at cloud. It's a fundamentally worse experience than what we had 5 years ago.
I understand why they've done what they've done, but I just think they've done it in such a bad way. That's what I don't understand with it.
Should we talk about something else they've done in a very bad way?
Yeah. So new look then. We're expecting a new look, just to summarise, but both of us are very sceptical around it. Agreed.
That's a good summarization. Something else we were both fairly sceptical about, although I think we were willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. We both installed the betas, was Apple Intelligence and the upgraded Siri. And this week it's kind of come out that the biggest Apple pundit, shill, no, I shouldn't call him a shill, he does occasionally say negative things about the company, John Gruber has come out and said that he doesn't think Apple Intelligence, or particularly Siri, is all that, based on an Apple meeting where Siri is going to take longer than we thought it would to arrive.
Yeah, and to be fair to John Gruber, he's also come out and said he got it wrong. He should have seen this come in, and he doesn't know why he didn't shout about it earlier. But it is interesting, isn't it? Apple have delayed. They've come out and said they're delaying a bunch of stuff, but what's really annoying is they've already started marketing stuff that they haven't released yet, and we're referring here to Siri getting more personable and being able to see what's on the screen and understand what's on the screen. And Apple said this was coming they announced it last June. It will come as part of the iOS 18, but we're coming towards the end of iOS 18's life now. We're 3 months away from the next version of iOS getting announced, and Apple still haven't delivered all the features, but yet they're marketing these features they haven't delivered. And it was a bit frustrating when the new phones came out. They were pushing Apple Intelligence even though it wasn't out yet, and then when Apple Intelligence gets here, it's actually not that big a deal right now. There's some nice things in it, the way you can summarize text and that, but none of it's really a game changer. And this stuff was already available with ChatGPT, so it's not really adding that much above and beyond what's already out there. And because ChatGPT was already out there, certainly when I look at my non-tech members, my family and friends, they're just using ChatGPT because it's got this marketing hype around it. So Apple have just really failed to deliver this one. This is why they shouldn't pre-announce stuff. They definitely shouldn't pre-market something that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack, isn't there? The whole iPhone 16 was sold on the back of Apple Intelligence. There was advertising around the personal context. What's on my screen? Who is that person? When did I last speak to them? They've had to pull those adverts. And I think the worst thing for Apple is, and a lot of Gruber's points are around, they're not a company that used to announce things that didn't appear. So AirPower being the only thing he could really think about, which was a charging mat where you could do your AirPods, your watch, and your phone all in the one mat, and they could never bring it to market because they caught fire apparently. But it was an announced product that they didn't ship, and that's unusual for Apple. We have both noticed a tendency over the last couple of WWDCs for them to announce software features that don't actually make it in right till the end. They sort of scrape in on the 0.5 or 0.6 release just before the betas of the next ones. And we've seen that with Final Cut Pro, we've seen that with the continuity, we've seen that with all sorts of things over the years. But in this case, it's a feature that's not only late, and the current thinking is that this personalized Siri won't make it into iOS 19 even. It'll be in iOS 20, if we're lucky. And underlying all this is, who's asking for it? I mean, that's, as you've said, ChatGPT have the mind share here. Even if you're aware of Apple Intelligence, and you can get it to run on your phone, it's doing some fairly rubbish grammatical summarization for you. It's got a terrible app when it comes to making AI images of people's faces, the image playground, and that's pretty much it. The other thing was the personalized Siri, and it was even getting wrong if you would ask the personalized Siri to summarize information about Apple products. Gruber, in one of his reports last week, had a thing about how do I switch off a setting on this Mac, or how do I switch off a setting on this phone, and it was getting that wrong. So there's serious problems here if they're asking you to wait 2 years at this point for a product that A, isn't doing what it said it would now, and B, lacks a lot of the fundamentals. We all think Siri's stupid. This isn't making it any better.
No, I think you and I are in a similar place here. It really felt like they were going to bring out Apple Intelligence, and it wasn't going to be revolutionary, but it was going to bring them to the similar place everybody else was at. That's what it felt like, and they've massively missed the mark on it, which is interesting because obviously they've thrown a lot of engineering resource behind it. They failed to deliver it, and I think it's frustrating because other parts of the OS have suffered for it. Should they have partnered deeper with somebody? They obviously wanted to own the tech stack and do it themselves and only back off some things to third parties like ChatGPT as they do now. But it feels like Apple have tried to do something that they haven't been able to do. Should they have bought somebody? Maybe. There's a lot of AI startups in that space, but they just, for whatever reason, there seems to be a Siri curse that anything they do with that 4 letters just not seem to bode well for the company.
Yeah, it's not a great state of affairs. I mean, and they bought Siri, as I recall. Siri was a purchase that they
I
bought
think you're correct, because it was already called that, I think, before they acquired it.
Yeah. It was a voice assistant or something previous to that, which was sort of a very limited way of going. So I don't think they've covered themselves with glory here. The only good thing about Apple Intelligence that I can see is that it's increased the amount of RAM on the laptops. That the 16 gigs of RAM as default now, I think, is where they should have been a couple of years back. So that's good. But do you think it would have harmed Apple that much if they'd said nothing about intelligence, just released the operating systems with the updated designs and all the rest of it? I've turned Apple Intelligence off on my devices. I'm not missing anything. You've said you're not that bothered about it. Your family members aren't noticing it. I don't hear people out in the world talking about it. I don't think it's a thing. They shouldn't have said anything. They shouldn't have sold the phones on it. They should have just gone with better cameras. You can put widgets where you want now. Well, security updates. And they could have been getting on and making the operating systems work correctly while in the background just being quiet. Apple Intelligence is coming. Look, we're doing AI stuff on photos. That would have been enough for most people, I think. Market-wise, maybe some investors went, yay, Apple Intelligence. But this is only going to hurt them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's been a big misstep, and probably one of the biggest missteps they've had for a while now, other than dealing with the butterfly keyboard quickly and quietly. I think you're right. It's been a massive misstep for them. Everybody that's got Apple Intelligence doesn't really care. The only thing I like is the new animation, if I'm being honest. That's it.
Don't miss it that much. I mean, I think the more fundamental problem here is Apple hardware is good.
It's so good.
Apple software. Yeah, it's so good. It's the best it's ever been in many ways.
And they've barely made a mistake, other than where they put the power button on my Mac Mini. I think they make very few mistakes for the scale size that they're operating at. Their hardware is impressive, to say the least. Yeah. It's really good.
The blips in Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connection we talked about are just that, blips.
Yep.
You know, they released a whole new C1 modem that seems to have gone down absolutely fine.
Agreed.
That's a big deal. The hardware is good. The software is not. And the worst thing is, the worrying thing is it's getting worse and they're not taking time to figure out problems. So you're racing ahead with good hardware, bad software, and the most fundamental problem to me is you're selling it on things that aren't happening. Apple Intelligence was what sold iPhone 16s. And if you disappoint people that it's such a terrible thing, the next phone they might check out the phone that's got better AI integration, which Google Gemini might be good enough by then. Samsung will have ChatGPT built in, whatever that is. Why would you stick with the thing that promised you something and then didn't deliver? And that's got to be a concern from marketing. And Apple's always been good at marketing. A few missteps there recently as well. You should have the product and then market the product, not market it and then never release the product or disappoint the customer. That's the Osborne effect right there.
Yeah, agreed. And Osborne announced it far too early and then went bust because everybody stopped spending until they could get it. Whereas Apple were kind of promising that the money you're spending now on your iPhone will give you more functionality in the future. And I'm not amazing not being hit with some form of false advertising here because you're selling stuff that just blatantly isn't coming. Yeah, I think it's super interesting. And when they first announced Apple Intelligence, I think we all thought, oh, it's odd they're not changing the name of Siri. But now you can see why, because they really haven't got it. And they're so far behind the curve with it. And they've spent so much engineering on it that we're not getting anything else. So, yeah, very, very strange circumstance we've ended in. And 18 point, whatever we're on 4, I think is in beta at the moment. There's nothing in there to do with AI at all. It's just a very minor update. There's nothing groundbreaking.
I mean, they stood there on the stage and they showed it would be intelligent enough to pick up this flight had been delayed and, I'm going to book a table for you at a restaurant when your mum lands and all that kind of stuff. It's absolute fiction. I mean, they lied, effectively, about what the product was going to be able to do in that period of time. It's pretty unacceptable. And I understand why Gruber is so annoyed about it.
I think it was aspirational. And maybe they believe their own hype, but software's hard. And they haven't been able to deliver it.
Software's hard, and LLMs get things wrong quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, agreed.
And you can't get stuff like this wrong. If people are going to depend on a product to tell you about your mum's flight or summarize a news story without it lying to you, and getting the actual headline wrong, which all they've done is they switched off that feature. They haven't fixed the feature. They just switched off the ability to summarize them. There's serious issues going on here for a company as big as Apple.
Yeah, agreed. And it's in beta, and then they've turned it on by default for people. I just every step they seem to make is the wrong step with it. They should have brought it out. They should have left it in beta. They shouldn't have sold it as hard as they did and said, look, we're doing some things in this space. You can turn it on if you want, and it's coming. And I think they've got a lot right, like the way you can put up the Siri to type and things. They've done some good things. They made some good decisions, but the whole thing wrapped up together just is not really working.
And this is still on the Apple Intelligence page. Discover an even more capable integrated personal Siri. No, you won't.
And they should definitely. And look, and it does say the features in development will be in a future software update, but they should really tone all that back now.
That's really small text for a very long web page.
Because all you've got here is, like I say, more aspirational design concepts than actual functionality.
Yeah, I think it's nonsense. And just to shut this story and we'll move on. Is in the back of this is things that LLMs are good at, which is helping you with coding, also delayed. So they also announced Swift Assist, which would help you with Xcode. We talked last week about ChatGPT's integration with Xcode and Visual Studio. Where's Apple's one that they talked about at WWDC last year?
Yeah, and this is more of a, like you say, a more constrained problem to solve. Should be easier, but yet they can't seem to do that either. So it is really strange where they've ended up, I think. like I say, it just doesn't feel whether they've got the right capability, whether they've got the capability, capacity, ability with everything else they've got going on. They seem to really miss the mark here. I'm really surprised by how little they've actually delivered of what they promised, because generally Apple have, in the last few years, when they've said, right, here's the new version of iOS, here's the things that will come throughout the next 12 months, they've had a reasonable track record at bringing that to market, but this has been a massive miss.
Yeah, and it all adds up is the problem. This is cumulative. In a world where you've got the EU set against you, you've got the Department of Justice looking at you quite carefully, you've got developers leaving you, well, not leaving you, but disenfranchised and disillusioned with your products and your software and your ability to fix bugs and taking them seriously and paying them and alternative app stores and everything that's going on. It's really complicated. And I think what we're saying is Apple aren't being able to walk and chew gum at the same time in almost every situation, except hardware. And the software side really need to step up, and the marketing lot need to shut up to a certain extent. Of course, they're a marketing-driven company, but they have if any company has got a large audience of people who will just buy the next thing without thinking about it, yes, we're sheeple. It's Apple, and they're really torching all that at the moment for the believers, which is you and me, and the developers who make their money out of it, and that will filter down to the customers at some point.
Yeah, I completely agree with you here. Yeah, and it's frustrating. It's hard to toe the line, isn't it? I think, and go, you should get Apple because they deliver, it does what it says, and it's really secure, and it's clever, and it's better. And in this scenario, they're not demonstrating that at all.
No, they're not. Should we move on and do an app of the week?
Yeah, let's do it.
So my app of the week is Nextcloud. Have you heard of Nextcloud?
I have not.
So Nextcloud is a personalized cloud, effectively. It's an open source thing where you can run on a device or can get someone to run it for you, which will give you some of the file syncing abilities you'd get from a Dropbox or an iCloud or a OneDrive or something like that. But of course, if you run it yourself, it's all within your own domain. You can bolt onto it add-ons like a password manager or an Office suite or almost anything you can think of. It's a hugely integrated platform that will do mail, it will do all sorts of stuff. So I spun it up this week. I had a Raspberry 5 kicking around. I had nothing better for it to do at that point. I installed a Nextcloud Pi image, and now I have my own. It's actually in the corner behind me. Raspberry Pi with a 500 gigabyte drive attached to it that I can visit and synchronize on all my Macs. And I gotta say, I'm really impressed with A, how easy it was to set up, and B, I've now got control over a cloud syncing thing that just lives in my Finder in the same way that OneDrive or iCloud does, that I can just sync things to, and it just works. I've set all sorts of auto updates in place for it, so it will update itself, new versions of PHP or Linux that it's running on or everything, and I've got complete control over my data, and isn't that nice?
That's quite cool. I massively rely on iCloud, probably far too much for my own good, but that does sound quite cool.
It was really easy to do. I flashed an image to my SD card. There's a nice, as you can see if you're watching the YouTube channel, script that you can run through. Once you've got it up and running, there's a web-based interface as well. You can just visit that and configure it there. You can say back up to an SMB drive on my network. You could put in another USB drive into it and back up all your files and data to there as well. So they've thought about all this stuff. They've thought about people attacking, whatever interface to it network you've set up to have access to it. I've been really impressed with it, actually.
Yeah, no, it looks really good. I love seeing that screen there. That just reminds me of the good old days of a DOS loading screen of some description. It takes me back.
The web side of it doesn't look like that, though. And of course, sure. in the same way that Dropbox and iCloud Drive does, it just integrates with your Finder.
Right, okay. That is quite neat how that can happen.
So if you want file syncing, this will just do it for you.
Interesting.
Thing of the week.
So I've actually gone with the MacBook Air. I have not ordered one, but I did nip into London this week and I went to the Apple store just to see the new kit. I didn't really look at the iPads because they haven't really done anything with the iPads, but I did go and look at the MacBook Air, and as you can see on your screen, the blue one. Do you know what? I thought when people said they couldn't tell the difference between blue and silver, I 100% understand now, because I was in the Apple store and there was a blue one there, and in some lights you could barely see blue. It was really disappointing because you probably see me on this podcast, I always wear blue. I like blue, but that blue in the right light looks quite cool. In most lights looks silver, sadly. But what a thing.
Did you see Marcus Brownlee's review of it?
Yep. There's a link in the show notes to it.
He said the blue is as if somebody whispered the word blue just before they put them in the box.
Yep, I think that is fair. So I've had a look at the new equipment out, and do you know what? I looked at the laptops. These things are fantastic, and I think if I was buying a laptop, I'd probably go and get myself a midnight 13-inch MacBook Air M4, probably 512 hard drive, maybe a terabyte, 16 gig of RAM. I think it's a great device. I just think it looks fantastic, and I could happily send nearly anybody I know into a shop and go, look, if you want a good computer, go and buy a MacBook Air. You probably want the middle one because it's got 512 gig of storage. And you know if you want more storage, I think. But what a fantastic looking device. I just thought it looked awesome. I think they've nailed it, and their hardware looks so good. But I've got no need for one, so I haven't bought anything.
I think that's the exact computer. If you need a Mac, you're not sure what you want, just go and buy this middle MacBook Air here. I'd go for
midnight.
I'd go for midnight. Yeah,
midnight's the best colour there, and if you're buying a Pro, probably the space black looks awesome, especially now they've done the fingerprintless technology on it, so that it doesn't smudge so much.
I think you know if you're a pro as well. This will do almost everything. You can edit in Final Cut Pro, you can edit in Logic, you can manage your photographs. Hard drive could be bigger, but 512s are more than enough. In most cases, you can plug in something external or go a network drive or your Nextcloud. I think it's the right computer to buy. Good choice.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I was questioning is, would I prefer the slightly better screen with the ProMotion on the Pro? But the Pro is a bit heavier and a bit chunkier. And actually, would I use anything else on it? Probably not. So I would probably buy this every day of the week.
I'm probably unusual in that I immediately plug my laptop into my screen, either at home or at work. And I'd probably do the same thing. You know, you only need the screen when you're out and about and you're on a train or whatever. And frankly, when you're on a train and you just want to quickly get something done, I don't think you're going to notice the ProMotion.
I think you're right. And also you want something light just to chuck in your bag to get from A to B. I love having my 10-inch or 11-inch iPad Pro because it's generally quite a light bit of kit. I just chuck it in the bag. It doesn't take up much space. So what a fantastic piece of kit. This is what I'd recommend anybody go and buy. And we said that last week, and now I've seen them in person. I doubly say it.
The MacBook Air, the computer for almost everybody.
Yeah, they've nailed it.
I think we can call that a show, Chris.
I think so. So if anybody wants to get in contact, Rod is at G5Maniac at mastodon.scot. He's also on Blue Sky, he's at G5Maniac at bsky.social. Or you can reach me on Mastodon. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube by going to our website and click on the YouTube link. Or you can drop us an email, wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.